High above the city on a tall column stood the statue of the happy prince. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword head. He was very much admired indeed. He is as beautiful as a weathercock, remarked the townspeople. What a beautiful statue! Oh, town councillors who wished to gain a reputation for having artistic taste remarked Happy Prince statue as beautiful, marvelous, and a great piece of art. One night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had stayed behind, for he was in love with the most beautiful reed. He had been flying above and below the river, and he was monitoring the beautiful reed. It was a ridiculous attachment, twittered the other swallows, and they flew to Egypt back. He had met her early in his spring as he was flying down the river after a big yellow moth, and he had been so attracted by her slender waist that he had stopped to talk to the reed. The swallow and the reed were both in love with each other. The swallow forgot the friends and stayed behind the reed and kept talking to her. "Shall I love you?" said the swallow, who liked to come to the point at once, and the reed made him a low bow. So the swallow decided that the reed was surely in love with him. So again and again the swallow's heart longed for the reed's love. So he flew round and round her, touching the water with his wings and making silver ripples. This was his courtship, and it has lasted all through the summer. "Will you come away with me?" he said finally to her. The reed shook her head. She was so attached to her home. "You have been trifling with me," he cried. "I'm off to the pyramids. Goodbye," and he flew away. All day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city. Then he saw the statue on the tall column. "I will put up there," he cried. "It is a fine position with plenty of fresh air." So he alighted just between the feet of the happy prince. The swallow prepared to go to sleep, but just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large 3 drops of water fell on him. The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears. "Who are you?" he said. "I am the happy prince." "Why are you weeping then?" asked the swallow. "You have quite drenched me. Look at me, how drenched I look." "When I was alive and had a human heart," answered the statue, "I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace of San Zuzi, where sorrow is not allowed to enter. So I was happy prince. In the daytime I played with my companions in the garden, and in the evening I led the dance in the great hall. Round the garden ran a very lofty wall, but I never cared to ask what lay beyond it. Everything about me. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was, if pleasure be the happiness. I am dead. They have set me up here so high that I can see all the ugliness and all the misery of my city and my people. Far away in a little street there is a poor house of a seamstress. In a bed in the corner of the room her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking for oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but only the river water. I wanted to help her. When I look at my people and their sufferings, my heart melts and I shed tears. So he is crying, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? Can you help me, swallow? The ruby will definitely help the boy and the seamstress? Since they are poor, I wanted to help. Will you help me, Swallow? The swallow was not ready to help immediately. So the prince again, Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince, will you not stay with me for one night and be my messenger? The boy is so thirsty and the mother so sad. The swallow was keep thinking whether to help the happy prince or not. Happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. It is very cold here, he said. But I'll stay with you one night and be your messenger. Thank you, little swallow, said the prince. So the swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's ward and flew away with it in his beak over the roofs of the town. At last he came to the poor house and looked in. The boy was tossing feverishly on his bed, and the mother had fallen asleep. She was so tired taking care of her work and her son. In he hopped and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Once she wake up, she'll be surprised on seeing the ruby. Then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. How cool I feel, said the boy. I must be getting better. And he sank into a delicious slumber. The swallow has done a great job. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. It is curious, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now. Although it is so cool, that is because you have done a good action, said the prince. Then the swallow flew in the morning. Once the day broke down, he flew down to the river and had a bath. What a remarkable phenomenon, said the professor of ornithology as he was passing over the bridge. A swallow in winter, he admired. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you not stay with me one night longer? Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Far away across the city I see a young man in a garret. He is trying to finish a play for the director of the theatre. But he is too cold to write any more. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. So, will you help me, swallow? Asked the prince. The prince said, my eyes are made of sapphires. Pluck out one of them and take it to him. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy food and firewood and finish his play. Please help me, swallow. Dear prince, said the swallow, I cannot do that, and he began to weep. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Do as I command you. So the swallow plucked out the prince's eye and flew to the student's garret and reached his house through a hole. The young man had his head buried in his hands and was deeply worried, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings. When he looked around, he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. He looked so happy. When the moon rose, the swallow flew back to the happy prince. I came back to you to bid goodbye, little prince, he cried. Everybody who saw the little swallow, they admired. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you not stay with me one night longer? I have another duty to help my people. Will you help me, swallow? Asked the prince. In the square below, said the happy prince, there stands the little match girl. She has left her matches fallen in the gutter. They're all spoiled. Her father will beat her if she does not bring home some money, and she's crying. She has no shoes or stockings, and her little head is bare. My heart was so sad. My heart was feeling painful when I see the match girl suffering. So I wanted to help her. Will you help me, Swallow? Will you be my messenger? Pluck out my other eye and give it to her, and her father will not beat her. But I cannot pluck out your eye, said the swallow. Swallow, said the prince, do as I command you. So he plucked out the prince's other eye and darted down with it. He swooped past the match girl and slipped the jewel into the palm of her hand. What a lovely bit of glass, cried the little girl, and she ran home laughing, and she was so happy. Then the swallow came back to the prince. You're blind now, he said. So I'll stay with you always, said the little swallow. But the prince said, you must go away to Egypt. No, said the swallow. I'll stay with you always, prince. And he slept at the prince's feet. The swallow and the prince been getting together with stories, and they were becoming so closer and thicker friends. Dear little swallow, said the prince, you tell me of marvelous things, but more marvelous than anything is the suffering of men and women. There is no mystery so great as a misery. Lay over my city, little swallow. Go and see. Come back and tell me what is happening with my people. I wanted to know how they were. So the swallow flew over the great city and saw the rich people making merry in their beautiful houses, while the beggars were sitting at the gates, looking at the people who are rich, where they don't have hearts to help the poor people. So the swallow noticed everything. And also under the archway of a bridge, two little boys were lying in one another's arms to try and keep themselves warm. How hungry we are, they said. You must not lie here, shouted the watchman. And they wandered out into the Rhine. There were so many homeless people, no food, only poverty, everybody suffered. The swallow flew back and told the prince what he had seen. Now the prince's heart felt more painful for his people. Immediately the happy prince wanted to help the people. I am covered with fine gold, said the prince. You must take it off leaf by leaf and give it to the poor people. The living always think that gold can make them happy. Swallow, do as I command. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold the swallow picked off, until the happy prince looked quite dull and grave. Leaf after leaf of the fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played games in the street. We had our bread, they cried. Happy prince gave every gold to the swallow. The swallow, as a good messenger, took all the gold out of the prince's body and it gave it to the poor. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder, but he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well, and he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell dead at his feet. The only friend of the happy prince is dead now. So the happy prince heart melts for the true messenger swallow. So before the death of the swallow kissed the prince's lips and lay dead. At that moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped right into two. It certain was a dreadfully hard frost. Now the happy prince was no more alive. Early in the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below in company with the town councillors. As they passed down the column, he looked up at the statue. Dear me, how shabby the happy prince looks, he said. The statue was not quite a charming, beautiful, shining pride statue of the city anymore. It is too shabby. The ruby has fallen out of his sword, his eyes are gone, and he's golden no longer, said the mayor. In fact, he's little better than a beggar. Little better than a beggar, said the town councillors. They all felt so shameful looking at the shabby statue of the happy prince. They see only the external beauty. So they pulled down the statue of the happy prince, as he is no longer beautiful, he is no longer useful, said the art professor at the university. Nobody knows the value of the happy prince over there. Then they melted the statue in a furnace, and the mayor held a meeting of the corporation to decide what was to be done with the metal. We must have another statue, of course, he said, and it shall be a statue of myself, said the councillor. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. We must throw it away. So they threw it on the dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. Now the happy prince heart and swallow was united. Bring me the two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels. The angel brought to the god the leaden heart of the happy prince and the dead bear. You have rightly chosen, said God, for in my garden of paradise this little bat shall sing for evermore, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. Now God has rewarded the happy prince and the bird very well. Both is with God now. Their deeds were rewarded now. Whatever we sow, we will reap. Happy prince sowed kindness and he was rewarded by God. Happy ending. Thank you.